vital moment in this game. I make it 5.5 minutes remaining of the Skull Cup final. Penalty to Rangers. Done with the greatest simplicity by the man hoisted up by McCoy's, Davie Cooper. And once again, the Rangers supporters erupt.
I was lucky enough to catch Davie Cooper when I was very young, when he first started at Clydebank. My father was very friendly with Jack Steedman, who ran Clydebank in these days, knew each other very well. So Dad would take me down to Kilbowie, and I saw a talented player on the left-hand side, ghosting past defenders with incredible ease, and immediately you were starstruck with this guy. You couldn't believe the ability that he had. He was running past players with no problem, twisting in and out, and then whipping balls into the box that the strikers just couldn't believe that the service they were getting. So I knew right away, even though I was very young at that time, that Davie Cooper was something special. He had to wait a few years before he got his move, but he certainly played a huge part in Clydebank at that time, driving them through the divisions and then getting them to the Premier League, as it was in these days, eventually.
I did a lot of games at Clydebank and I got quite friendly with Coop. At that time of my career, I was delighted when the sports editor said, you're doing the Clydebank game on Saturday. Coop was a magician.
The first thing that I recall was when he came to the attention of Rangers fans was a 1976 League Cup saga with Clydebank, when he played for Clydebank. Quarter-final tie, home and away, strangely enough. It was a draw after the first two games. It went to a first replay and it went to a second replay before Rangers won. Davie Cooper scored in 3 of those 4 games, which brought him to the attention of Rangers fans and I guess the Rangers management, and he gave Rangers a really hard time at that point.
Davie Cooper had lit up the stadiums where the games were being hosted and traumatised John Greig. John Greig was playing as left back and Davie Cooper played in wide right, and he tormented him, totally tormented him. I don't know whether there was a wee bit of devilment there from Davie Cooper because Rangers was his team, that he found a wee bit extra, an edge to his game in these cup ties. But everyone and the dogs in the streets were shouting, Rangers have to sign Davie Cooper.
And I remember I think it was something I heard Davie Cooper saying his first game he was up against Big Greig as well, and it said very early on he's thinking, I'm playing at Ibrox, it's my hero, it's John Greig. I think Greig did what Big John Greig did early on, get in, he was down on the ground, Greig came over to him, Davie Cooper thinks he'll go, sorry about that wee man. Big Greig does the plenty more where that came from type of, but I remember at that point in time we were just thinking, this wonder kid, he just looks so good.
Jock Wallace's Rangers had won the treble in '76, and then the following season didn't win anything. Celtic won the double. And I think most of us fans at the time felt that the team needed a bit of refreshing. A lot of players had been there for quite a while, and it was felt the team as well didn't have a lot of flair in it. So we relied quite heavily on Tommy McLean for creating goals. Guys like Bob McKean were there as well, but it was felt that they weren't the most entertaining Rangers team. And in the summer, Jock Wallace brought in Davie Cooper from Clydebank, which gave us great balance in the left wing. That's had our first proper left winger for a couple of seasons, as well as another great crosser of the ball. He brought in Bobby Russell, who brought in youth, creativity into the midfield, and he brought in Gordon Smith, and he brought extra goal threat into the team.
I think Davie Cooper was the first £100,000 signing since Colin Steen. The Colin Steen was the first sort of late 60s. So that I think that shows you how much we spent on Colin Steen, that it took so long for us to do it again with Davie. But I mean, he was worth every penny. I mean, £100,000 for Davie Cooper, I mean, I don't know what he'd be worth now.
The fact that I don't think I've ever saw 3, especially young, new signings gel so quickly as these 3 guys. I mean, virtually, 3 of them were virtually ever present the whole time. And they were like a breath of fresh air. That's probably what made Rangers so good. You know, when these 3 guys were in the team and they brought success to the club, they were like a breath of fresh air. They played the game without inhibition.
Clyde taking it, that's towards Colin Jackson. There's Smith, and that must be Cooper.
Coop and Bobby Russell had a tremendous relationship on the pitch. It was almost telepathic. I think they gelled immediately. Two great signings, as was Gordon Smith. But yeah, the link up between Bobby and Davie Cooper was really special. They all seemed to know where each other were. Definitely on the same wavelength. I think absolutely crucial to that treble winning season.
Smith quickly to the other end. Cooper unmarked. Back to Smith. Smith going on the outside but running into trouble. Turns it out in front. Cooper scores! Cooper scores for Rangers. 6 minutes from half time. Dave Cooper's 7th goal of the season. Made by Gordon Smith. 3 minutes remaining. Smith to Johnston. Miller coming up as the extra man. There's his cross. There's Latchford, the ball spinning loose. Headed in by Smith, and the referee's giving a goal. Gordon Smith scores. 3 minutes from the end of extra time. His 23rd goal of the season, and for the second time in the match, Rangers go into the lead.
Cooper coming infield, Derek Johnston. Russell, Johnston signalling for a return. Alec McDonald, beautiful goal by Alec McDonald. 34 minutes, Rangers 1-up. Jock Wallace, the Rangers manager, saying well done to all the players. There is the face of a very, very happy man. McKean. Johnston. Gordon Smith. Cooper. Left foot goal, a brilliant equaliser.
Davie Cooper was really a unique talent, even in the 70s, in Scotland in particular. I mean, Scottish fans have been growing up on great wingers, you know, at Rangers and Celtic and different clubs. Willie Henderson, obviously, Davy Wilson, Bud Johnson. Willie Johnson could play wide. Alex Scott, prior to Willie Henderson, on the right-hand side, certainly at Ibrox. But Cooper was different in the sense he wasn't the quickest player, but it was all about his ability. I mean, he could just lose a defender so easily with just a drop of the shoulder, a quick movement, dragging his foot over the ball, and he would bewilder the best of them. And that's what made him stand out from the crowd.
And I think now they use the terms inverted or so on. Obviously we didn't, but he could switch, could go from left to right as well. He could also come deep too. So it wasn't a case of the old-fashioned one. He was the kind of Tanner ball player in terms of when he got the ball, and he could beat people, and it was very much, even in tight spaces, you knew. He had this wonderful wee kind of trick as well of running at people as they were coming back. Do I go in, do I not go in? But just leaving the ball enough for them not to. But while he was doing that, quickly glance. The player's too busy looking at what Coop's doing, then suddenly plays it, balls that people wouldn't see.
The thing with Davie Cooper at that time, they couldn't take their eyes off him. You know what I mean? Even if he was having a bad day, they knew he was always capable of a bit of magic. They knew he was always capable of one wee thing that could change the game. And so, when I used to go to games in Ibrox watching Davie Cooper in the days, they used to double up on him. So when Cooper was on the wing, it wouldn't just be the fullback. Someone else would come out to meet him to try and stop him. So he was always occupying defenders, Cooper. Even when he wasn't playing well, he was always occupying.
Totally in control, totally in his own world, and able to do things that simply no other player who's maybe using a lot more energy on the field can do. And that was his style. Looked like it was so easy, and very much the style of the British winger of that era, really.
His right foot was really just for standing on, but to complain that Davie Cooper is one-footed is a bit like saying Van Gogh only painted sunflowers. You know, you just revelled in the beauty and the artistry of the patterns that you could weave in a football pitch.
This is an era, remember, where defenders were allowed to kick skillful players. They just couldn't catch him to do it. It was a tough shift being a winger in those days. And Davie played football the way that we all dreamed that we play football. I don't think any of us grow up hoping to be a midfielder that makes neat and tidy passes. It's that glamour thing. It's that ability to beat a man and to get the crowd going and to take a man on. And I think there's always something about a guy with a left foot that could just pick a ball perfectly, could just put a pass into an area perfectly. His crosses could be superb. And I think that he was always someone that even when the team wasn't at its best, you looked to because you knew he could do something. And there would be games he would be quiet, but then he would do something that nobody else on the park was remotely capable of doing.
He had a special way of playing. He liked to have the ball to his feet all the time. He wasn't keen on running. I mean, he could obviously run. He wasn't pacey as a winger as such. He would beat defenders with his artistry more than his pace. But in his debut for Rangers, he played alongside Tom Forsyth. And Tom told me that just before half-time, Tom broke out from defence and sent this pass into open space in front of Cooper. And as Tom said, it was one of the best passes ever made. It created space for Cooper to run into the box and perhaps score a goal. So Tom was quite proud of himself because it wasn't normal for him to break out of defence and make passes like that. And he said as the referee blew the whistle and we walked off the park, Coop shouted to me. He said, "Big man, big man." And Tom turned round. He says, "Play it to my feet." Tom said I was going to strangle him. He said, "I played this wonderful pass into space," but he said, "I realised then that Cooper liked the ball at his feet all the time." And that was just the way Davie Cooper was.
I was lucky enough to play with him as a teammate a couple of occasions, once at Rangers, once at Motherwell, but playing against Coop, I played against him many times. Very difficult to pin him down. He just had that much natural ability, and I think, thankfully, I was a centre forward, so I was at the opposite end of the pitch. I didn't have to go quite close to him because anybody that tried to close him down too much, he had a distinct habit of making the ball disappear and making you look a bit foolish. So, a genius on the pitch. Fantastic fella, and just he lit up football really for me. He was a foreign type of player playing in Scotland, and he had such good vision, great master of close control. Obviously he only had a left foot, he didn't have a right foot, we didn't need one. But to play against him in the opposition, which I did many times, very difficult to pin him down, and just a fantastic player.
I signed as a midfield player. Played left mid. Davie would be wide left, and in periods I would be playing left back, overlapping. Coop coming inside, playing balls down outside, and it was just a pleasure. 10 months I managed to play with him, and it was just great to be in a dressing room and seeing what he could do in the training park. And people go on, who was the best that you played with? Great players, so many great players, but Davie Cooper would be, because he was a hero of mine. And people say he wasn't the quickest, but he didn't need to be. He was so gifted that he could just drop a shoulder and move the ball, and he would just outfox the opponent.
I idolised Coop, along with myself and Derek Ferguson. He was our favourite player all time, and I had a great pleasure. Many times I played with Davie Cooper, and it was always a pleasure. One of the most fantastic, gifted football players Scotland has ever produced. And he gave me so many special times. Also now in the Rangers jersey, but also in the Scotland jersey, as I used to watch him everywhere and anywhere.
It really was quite seismic in the summer of '78. Rangers are on the crest of a wave. They've just won the treble for the second time in 3 years. And Jock Wallace decides he's leaving. I think it's well documented. It was mostly for financial reasons. He'd wanted a new, improved contract. The Rangers board wouldn't give him it. So he said, "OK, I'm leaving." John Greig had just signed a new 1-year contract. He was intending to play on for another year. But all of a sudden he was thrust into the manager's seat by Willie Waddle, and he couldn't turn it down. He's gone from being the captain and teammates of all these guys to the gaffer.
I think it's fair to say that John Greig adopted a much more pragmatic approach than Jock Wallace had, particularly in Europe. And initially, Davie Cooper played most of the games domestically, but in Greig's first season, 1978-79, Cooper only featured in 2 of the 6 European ties.
I think John Greig wanted to put his own stamp on the side, and what he wanted was a team who would win the ball back quickly out of possession, and I'm not sure that he had confidence that Davie Cooper would shoulder the wheel when this team were perhaps having to work that bit harder. And I don't think there was a personality clash by any stretch of the imagination, but if you look at the players that John Greig signed at that time, like Jim Bett, like Robert Pritz, they were more about industry than flair.
And to be fair, Greig's style of play, he beat Juventus, he beat PSV Eindhoven, got to European Cup quarter-finals, almost won the treble in his first season, so it's hard to argue that he'd done something wrong. But at the same time, we dropped a lot of points domestically. We were quite inconsistent domestically. We really should have won the treble that first season, but we dropped too many silly points. And I think a lot of it was the fact that Cooper got dropped too often and we didn't have enough flair in the team in big games. Once John Greig had left, Jock Wallace obviously came back to the club for a second time. Cooper got a bit of a lease of life when Jock Wallace came back. He the manager that signed him in the first place, and he seemed to trust him a bit more. He played him every week. He was an automatic choice in the team again. He had some great performances in the first few months of Jock Wallace's second spell. He had this brilliant performance against Dundee United in the semi-final of the League Cup. The first half he was absolutely unplayable. It was almost like a training exercise. He was going by players as if they didn't exist.
Coop was not a good trainer. Anybody that played with him and trained with him, all the boys that would run in, he said, throw your ball. No, I mean, at the end of the day, Coop was all about the ball, all about possession of the ball. Him and Jock would have a total respect for each other. I think Jock would just let Coop play. The rest of us had to accommodate that in such a way that you'd maybe chase back for him or do whatever. I wasn't renowned for that myself. But again, I think they had a very, very healthy respect for each other. And you look what both of those guys did for Glasgow Rangers, then you can see why, because Jock was a fantastic person, great motivator. Again, I was too young to probably realise what he was trying to do. But again, had every respect for him, and I'm quite sure a mutual respect between Davie Cooper and Jock Wallace would be forever.
He was still capable of that brilliance, although the team weren't really winning that much. We weren't challenging for the league title very often. We were basically relying on cups to keep the trophy room with something in it.
That difficult period, again, right in his peak years, right in the middle of his career, would have been a challenge for him. I think the Rangers' support's appreciation for him would have been split. I think there'd be a lot of people for whom Cooper gave them something to hold on to in terms of aesthetics, in terms of skill and invention, and something that's worth coming to Ibrox for, and there weren't many coming in a lot of those years. For others who maybe value grit and effort and running about a lot, a wee bit more than they value an accurate pass, possibly felt that he didn't do enough and he wasn't involved enough, and it was maybe a young Ali McCoist who was giving them hope because there was return for that, the goals were there. It would absolutely be dependent, maybe even what generation of Rangers fan you would speak to, maybe those coming through, and this is their first experience of Rangers, not a lot of trophies to enjoy, but this guy who could do things that simply no other person in the park could do, that they maybe appreciated that maybe more than the generation that had gone before.
The Drybrough Cup's a long forgotten tournament, I would imagine. It was a pre-season tournament, played before the league or the League Cup had started. In fact, most people probably wouldn't believe this nowadays, but Rangers actually had their own pre-season tournament as well, called the Tennant Caledonian Cup. And we played both of them in the one weekend. So we played West Ham on the Friday night at Ibrox in the Tennant Caledonian Cup semi-final. Then we played Celtic in the Drybrough Cup final on the Saturday. Then we played the final of the Tennant Caledonian Cup on the Sunday. So we played 3 games in the one weekend. When it came to the Drybrough Cup final, Rangers and Celtic got to the final, Hampden. We were in a bit of a downer at the time. Celtic had beaten us in a league decider at the end of the previous season at Parkhead, 4-2. And they were basically still celebrating this this league triumph that we had, we were still feeling a bit miserable about it. We needed something to pick us up at the start of the following season, and that Drybrough Cup final absolutely did it.
John McDonald was playing his first Old Firm game and didn't expect to start. John McDonald got the opening goal of the game. A wonderful team goal, slipped back in for John McDonald to run onto and slotted past Peter Latchford in goal. He ran behind the goal to celebrate and was promptly sick, brought his breakfast up. He was just so overcome by emotion and was physically sick. Rangers won up, and that set them into cruise control in that match. Next goal, Sandy Jardine, well, claimed it was his greatest goal ever as well. If you get a chance to see the footage, he runs 70 yards with the ball from the right fullback area in a real mazy run, dribbling forward, and the finish wasn't dissimilar to his goal against Bayern Munich in the semi-final of the European Cup Winners' Cup 6 years before, where he cuts inside, chops inside onto his left foot and delivers it into the net. So a stunning goal. Everyone thinking that's goal of the season there now. No. Davie Cooper decided he was going to trump Sandy Jardine on the occasion.
It's just a goal that only people with this gift from God could do. First of all, to even think about it. Most players wouldn't even dream of doing something like that. But it's the elegance in it, it's the total mastery of the situation. It's the fact that the defenders might as well not be there for all the good. They're just a slight annoyance to Davie. It reminds me a lot of the Paul Gascoigne goal for England at Wembley, where it's just a guy who's on another level, who is thinking 2 steps, 3 steps ahead like a chess player. But then it's okay being able to think about doing it, to execute it, to stay calm. I mean, this is an Old Firm game at Hampden that he's doing this in. And of course, just chip one way, chip the other, back again. And then when he gets in front of the goal, to then have the calmness just to guide this ball into the back of the net. And it's one of those goals that whenever you see it, even decades later, you look at it and you think, how did he do that? I mean, it shouldn't be possible. It's so beautiful, and again, it's one of these goals that remind you why you love football, because a player can do this.
Slipped beautifully forward. From this replay, you can tell why they are. McDonald certainly gave him the ball, but he didn't have much help after that. He was on his own. Look at the close attention. He keeps it, cool head and away.
The Scottish Cup final 1981 is probably the best example of what Cooper could do. That was back in the days that the cup final would go to a replay if it was a draw. It didn't go to penalties back then. The first game was 0-0. Pretty uninspiring. We actually missed a penalty right at the end, and if we'd won it, it'd been one of these instantly forgettable cup finals that you win.
Cooper was on the bench for Derek Johnstone and John McDonald, and so we needed something to change, and John Greig decided to bring all 3 back, and within 8 to 10 minutes Cooper had scored the opening goal. The 3 of them, the 3 guys who'd been benched, come on and really showed more of what we expect of Rangers, but Cooper was just magical that night, to the extent that the final has been called the Cooper final.
They're losing out there, chance again for Cooper. And that's the opener from Davie Cooper. 10 minutes of the clock, Davie Cooper puts Rangers in front. Look at the joy on the faces of these Rangers players and the their supporters. Cooper playing it in. Bobby Russell makes it 2. And that really was a wicked free kick from Davie Cooper. Another chance for Bannon. The stirrup. Playing it in towards Dodds. 2-1. Russell followed by Kirkwood. Missed by Coppell, but not by Neri. Good turn from Cooper. McDonald wants it inside the fullback. John McDonald! A superb goal from John McDonald!
People slightly younger than me always talk about Brian Loudrup against Hearts in 1996 as the great cup final performance. Cooper was every bit as good that night in 1981. And then later the same year, John Greig's last trophy as manager was again against Dundee United in the League Cup final this time. We were a goal down with 20 minutes to play. to be honest, and United had been the better team for most of the day. We really needed somebody to step forward, a bit of inspiration. Got a free kick at the edge of the box, Davie Cooper put it in the top corner. Ended up winning 2-1 with a goal in the last minute.
So it's Davie Cooper entrusted with the task of finding a way past that United wall. And he's made it! Davie Cooper gives Rangers the equaliser, and the match is right back in the melting pot. Well, he really is masterly from these set pieces. Was right on the 18-yard line, curling in over the wall and towards the top corner. Cooper fighting it in. He might well have left that. Redford. Ian Redford surely wins the cup for Rangers. Absolutely unbelievable.
Davie Cooper was known as a friend, also a teammate and a work colleague, but I'd class Davie Cooper as a friend, and when you get a friend like Davie Cooper, you're a friend for life.
Well, I think Davie was labelled as the Moody Blue and stuff by the press, but Davie was well known for liking a wee gamble in the afternoon, going to see the race, and if he missed the first race he wouldn't be too happy after training. So I think if any of the pressmen, I remember on one occasion a guy who came all the way down from Dundee for the Sunday Post to try and interview Davie, and let's just say he refused to do the interview because it was too close to the first race. So I think he got labelled a kind of moody person, but certainly not. When you got to know him, great company, we had many nights out, and Davie didn't really drink too much. It was quite strange for football at that time, and he didn't really drink too much when he was at Rangers. I think when he went to Motherwell, which I teamed up with him after that, he kind of relaxed that a wee bit, and we went for the odd beer or two and socialised. So certainly he might have been labelled as being a kind of quiet, moody kind of person, but far from it. If you were lucky enough to get to know him, you saw his personality, loved a laugh, had a great sense of humour, and just really a fantastic fella. And I've never heard anybody, no one had a bad word for Davie.
I remember when I first joined the Rangers News and I got pitched into the deep end a bit. I got sent on the pre-season tour of Sweden, 1983, and I'd only been in the job a few months, so it was quite nerve-wracking. I was still a teenager, and I turned up, and I didn't fly out of the team. The Rangers were slightly different. I arrived the day after, and I remember arriving at the team hotel, and all these guys are sitting there, big names, and Davie Cooper. Right, son, come here. And he sat me right in amongst them. They were having their evening meal. He sat me down beside him, and kind of introduced me to guys that maybe I hadn't met before. He couldn't have been nicer. So yeah, I never saw this moody blue side at all. He was just a really friendly guy. He was an ordinary guy, Davie Cooper, who had an extraordinary talent.
He liked his community, loved his family, liked his punting the horses. He was a homebird. And they referred to him as the Moody Blue. He always preferred that people just called him or saw him as the quiet man. He wasn't a brash character. He wasn't a showman off the field as he was, so highly skilled on it. I think he just enjoyed the environment in which he was living. He was a dead simple guy.
I knew Davie Cooper pretty well, and I knew some of his friends. I remember one of his friends conceded to me one time that Davie was given this name of the Moody Blue. He was quite introverted, really kind of shunned publicity, and I wondered why that was the case. And I spoke to one of his friends about it. He said, well, quite simply, he couldn't understand why people were interested in him. As far as he was concerned, he was simply a football player. Even though he was playing for Rangers and playing in big European matches and obviously playing for Scotland at that time as well, you couldn't understand his fascination because he just felt he was nothing special. And I think people found that hard to understand because most other people would recognise that football players have got special talent and are lauded by tens of thousands of people every Saturday. But for Cooper, he was just doing what he enjoyed, which was playing football.
And from this position, Davie Cooper can be a very, very dangerous striker of the ball indeed. there. 33 minutes. The magic left foot of Davie Cooper brings the game to life.
I always felt sorry for Davie Cooper because he was such a great player who standards did drop naturally at times, but he was such a great player, and you felt for him because without being too disrespectful to other players, he probably wasn't playing alongside a lot of great players at that time, and you just wanted something better for him.
There was actually a period, 84-85, when Davie Cooper actually was allowed to go out of contract at Rangers, which is scandalous. A club could have come in and there was talk about him maybe following Keegan and Tony Woodcock to Germany, and there was talk of England and Italy and Belgium and France, and he would have thrived in those atmospheres. You think of somebody like Glenn Hoddle, what he went on to do at clubs like Monaco. Cooper would have had that kind of influence, but Rangers in the end came to a compromise over his contract where David asked for X and Rangers weren't prepared to go, so in the end they settled for Y, but it was still more than Rangers were originally willing to pay. But it was only the threat of losing him to Newcastle United, who came in, and the very next day Rangers said, look, we better get this tied down, and so that was what persuaded him to stay.
Davie Cooper loved Rangers. He loved pulling on that jersey. For the most part at that time, Cooper was the one that the fans were coming to see. He would still get them on the edge of their seat. He would still have that ability to light up a game of football. But unfortunately, the team at that time didn't mirror that, and it was a pretty poor period for Rangers.
I think that you knew that Davie, this was his club, and I think the fans knew that. But it was a shame because he'd been in part of the great Rangers teams of the late 70s, and then in the early 80s. It was a very tough era because the other sides were good. It wasn't just that Rangers weren't as strong as we'd been. And certainly when I first started watching football, which was the early 80s, and first became a conscious supporter of Rangers, he was the hero. He was the one that you sort of pinned your hopes on. And there were times, where it looked as though he was being kind of sucked down into the mess that Rangers was at the time. But you definitely knew that if we had better players around him, then that would allow Davie to shine without having to take all the pressure, all the hopes of the fans, because that's a tough job when you've got the entire support saying, well, you need to do something all the time. And I think there was an awareness at the time that the team just wasn't strong enough, especially when you saw these other sides. I mean, Aberdeen, they won a European trophy. Dundee United got to the European Cup semi-final, and they were all packed with talented players, and there was a feeling that we'd been left behind, but we were starting to bring through some good young players, and there was hopes, and of course Souness happened and everything changed.
Welcome to the club again.
The arrival of Souness changed everything. Not just for Cooper, it changed everything for the support, changed everything for the club, changed Scottish football. No disrespect to the players that played before Souness arrived, but Souness himself, Teddy Butcher, Chris Woods, all coming in that summer, totally transformed the quality of the team. And Souness knew how good Cooper was. Although he was bringing in these other players, there was no way he was bringing in another left winger that first season. He'd played with Cooper at international level with Scotland. He knew what he was capable of. So he was the automatic choice in the wing of that team. And it was the team Davie Cooper was born to play in, that Rangers team under Souness.
Graham Souness told me that he felt that Coop's homesickness or his lack of desire to go abroad was a godsend to Rangers, because Graham, who had played, of course, in Italy with Sampdoria, he said he would have been a king in Serie A or anywhere you like. In Europe, he would have lit the place up. But he wasn't. He didn't have that cosmopolitan background. He was not a world traveller. Was Davie, and I know that because I went to World Cups with him, and I remember spending a lot of time with him in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and before we went on to the Mexico World Cup. Great company, but just not a guy who was going to wear out his passport.
He got his enthusiasm back, he got his enthusiasm for football back, and the crowds came back, and the games became more important and more exciting, and that lifted Davie Cooper as well as lifting the Rangers player, because it wasn't all new signings at first, it was the same team from the year before who won the League Cup more or less with just 3 signings, and Cooper was a great player within that team.
he also allowed them to play a bit deeper as well. It was like a bit like what Walter did with Laudrup too. Go and express yourself, play where you want to. And I think Davie Cooper was allowed to do that more under Souness.
I particularly remember the first Old Firm game of that league season, 86-87 at Ibrox, where it was really tense the end of August and Rangers had dominated but were struggling to break through, and it was Cooper coming in from the left and then just with a wee flick of the left foot, bang, plays in Ian Durrant to put it past Pat Bonner for the winning goal of the game. It was amazing.
Cooper with Durrant with a chance, and he's done it! A brilliant goal by Durrant. Superbly struck, brilliantly laid on by Davie Cooper. And if ever a team deserved a lead, it's Rangers.
Later in the season, Rangers played Ilves Tampere of Finland in the UEFA Cup, and they were 2-0 up. Robert Fleck had scored twice, and Cooper picked the ball up on the left-hand side, and he drifted in off the left-hand side, and the Finnish defenders backed off and gave Cooper space. And when you give someone with the ability of Davie Cooper space, then he's going to punish you. But I don't think anybody, when they witnessed Cooper picking the ball up at that moment in time, would expect that he would waltz his way through almost the entire Tampere defence.
Cuts inside, Finn's falling back. Still has it. An amazing run by Cooper. Could be a fantastic goal, it is. Oh, Davie Cooper, brilliant. Fleck hat-trick, what a goal. 7.5 minutes played. As superb a goal as you'll see.
He's honestly beat about 6 of them several times just because he could, and then he squares it. It's an absolute tap in. I could have scored it when I was 7. That season, just having those better players around him, having confidence in the rest of the team, and he did produce in big moments.
Come over Rangers. Beautiful performance by Cooper, and it's in. It's a goal, the equaliser. Brilliant run by Cooper.
League Cup was the first real opportunity to make a statement. Rangers had won the Glasgow Cup at the back end of season 85-86, which was considered Souness' first trophy. But this was the first real opportunity to make a statement that Rangers were back, Rangers had been reborn.
That was actually a great game. I watched it back in its entirety not that long ago. And it's a terrific game. When you look at the players on both sides, to be fair, there's some legends of both clubs there.
And Cammy Fraser is there, Butcher's there, Durrant is there and scores! Durrant has scored for Rangers. Edison, a brilliant equaliser. McClare.
With 5 minutes to go, scores are poised, one each, and Rangers win a free kick on the right-hand side. Derek Ferguson floats it across to the back post. Terry Butcher's fouled, and the referee decides it's a penalty kick.
He'd scored for Scotland down at Cardiff to draw one each with Wales, which more or less put Scotland through to the 86 World Cup. They beat Australia in a playoff, which they did. And I remember that night at Wales, when Scotland were awarded the penalty, nobody thought that Davie Cooper was going to miss it. That's how much confidence they had in him. And it was strange because he wasn't a regular penalty taker for Rangers. Ali McCoy's took a lot of the penalties, even Ian Durrant. Cooper never taken, dozens of penalties. But that night in Cardiff, everybody thought he was going to score, and he duly did. It was the same that day at Hampden. I think even the Celtic fans thought he was going to score.
Well, I think Davie Cooper, if he's taking a penalty kick, had a nice rehearsal down at Wales not so long ago.
A vital moment in this game. I make it 5.5 minutes remaining of the Skull Cup final. Penalty to Rangers. 2-1. Done with the greatest simplicity by the man hoisted up by McCoy's, Davie Cooper.
And there was something really fitting, I think, about Davie being the guy who brought the first trophy of the Souness era, because here was a guy who had faced so much in the early 80s, had so much responsibility placed on him, and having to play with guys who, with all due respect, were not capable of taking us to trophies. Here he was when he had a better side around him, and you saw the difference, and it was so fantastic.
That first season of Graham Souness at Rangers was so exciting for the supporters, because there was a real atmosphere and of a belief that finally this is a Rangers team that can become winners on a regular basis.
Playing with the array of talent that Graham Souness brought in, like Terry Butcher, Chris Woods, Graham Roberts. By that time, Ian Durrant was emerging as a box-to-box midfielder. Ali McCoist was scoring goals regularly. So playing with that kind of calibre of player made Cooper a better player. In Souness's first season 1986-87, Cooper missed the first 2 league games through suspension that was carried over from the previous season, but he played in each of the 42 that followed. Only McCoist with 44 and Terry Butcher and Stuart Monroe with 43 played more league games.
Cooper's impact in that season, I mean, it was the first league title I'd seen. You know, Rangers had went 9 years without it, and it was just brilliant. I mean, you could argue it was his best season. I've not seen enough. You know, I was too young to remember when he was performing really well in the sort of late 70s, but in terms of the seasons I saw him, you know, that 86-87 season was undoubtedly the best I seen him play for Rangers.
At the end of the season, Rangers go to Pittodrie, penultimate game, with an opportunity to win the league for the first time in 9 years. And looking back, seminal moments in history, people will pinpoint Terry Butcher, the cornerstone of that success, the marquee signing in the summer. He scores the goal that wins the league. But Terry Butcher doesn't score that goal that day if it's not for the quality, the precision, the accuracy of the free kick that's executed by Davie Cooper to create the goal. Again, on the left-hand side, he just picks the ball up from the free kick, fires the ball in, and it's so accurate, it's so precise, all Butcher has to do is redirect it into the corner. And it probably is something that isn't recognised as much as it should be, because again, the significance, it's Butcher that scores the goal, but the assist from Cooper, again, illustrated just how much ability, just the genius of the man to be able to execute that cross and pick out Butcher and know exactly where Butcher was going to be to allow him to score that goal.
There's Cooper, there's Butcher, he scored! Butcher has scored for Rangers!
This one for Faulkner to chase, he's free of the Rangers defence, and down goes Willie Faulkner. That is a penalty kick.
Rangers faced Aberdeen in the League Cup final in season 1987-88, and they trailed 1-0. Jim Bett scored early from a penalty kick, but Rangers won a free kick on the edge of the penalty area. Willie Miller had fouled Ali McCoist.
Whenever somebody scores a really spectacular goal at a football game, there's always this little half second of silence before the crowd erupt, because folk are still trying to appreciate what they've just seen. That's what happened that day. The ball was hit so hard you could actually hear it hitting the net.
Roberts is dictating things. That's brilliantly struck by Davie Cooper. 21 minutes gone, Rangers have equalised. And a stunning free kick from Davie Cooper.
It was struck with such accuracy, venom, precision. I don't think a team of goalkeepers lined across the 8 yards could have got a sniff of it.
It wasn't, take this free kick, I'll hit it as hard as I can and hopefully it gets past the wall and beats the keeper. He did that deliberately. He stuck it in that top corner deliberately. That's the work of a magician.
There's the famous story Davie told about it, which was that Jim Leighton said to him a few days later at a Scotland game, you know, I nearly got a hand to that. And he said, aye, on the way out. And that it just lashed into the top of the goal. It's a good job it did, because if it hit the crossbar it would have broke it. It was a phenomenal strike, and it really is one of the greatest Rangers goals of all time in a cup final against a very, very strong side and a very good goalkeeper, and to produce that. But that's what elite players do. They produce in the big moments. It's not just about doing it when you're 3-0 up at Ibrox. It's can you do it when it really matters, when the side's under pressure, when there's something on the line, and he could.
Coop was amazed that day. and it was a fairly enjoyable cup final, 3 each. After the game, then we beat them penalties again. Coop turned up again and slotted home a penalty to win the cup.
So another expert from the penalty spot. Remember the one he scored for Scotland against Wales in Cardiff to get Scotland on course for the World Cup. Here he goes again. Absolutely deadly. If Durrant scores, Rangers are the winners. There will be no need for any other kick. Perfectly taken by Durrant. Rangers have won the Scotland League Cup after a match packed full of drama.
His testimonial was against a French club called Bordeaux, summer of 1988, just before the season 88-89 started. Celtic were making all the headlines. They had just won the double. Actually, Rangers had just finished third the season before. We had a really terrible end to the season and ended up we finished behind Hearts as well. There was a bit of unhappiness at the time. And I remember people were talking about, I wondered if it would affect the crowd at Davie Cooper's testimonial. So I went to the game that night in the supporters' bus and the traffic was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. It took us forever to get anywhere near Ibrox, finally got parked, and it was only about 10-15 minutes from kick-off by the time we got to the stadium. And by the time we got there, most of the gates were shut. Stadium full, stadium full. We just, and I mean just, scraped into the west enclosure, which was a standing enclosure at that point in time. We got in and literally 20 seconds later the gate behind us got shut as well, or else we wouldn't have got in. There was thousands locked out, which I think tells you everything about how much the support thought of Davie Cooper. That even at a time that Rangers had through a pretty ropey spell, there's no way that the guy that was the favourite player of the vast majority of the support, there's no way that he wasn't going to get the tribute he deserved. And he got it at packed Ibrox and we won 3-1.
It seems extraordinary that a player of Davie Cooper's talent was capped so infrequently for Scotland. You know, younger fans will look at the old videos and stuff like that and they'll say, this guy's sensational, how on earth was he playing more regularly for Scotland? He played, Jock picked him you know, in the early part of his career as Scotland manager, and he played a key role around about the 78, 79, 1980 period. But football was changing into more of a 4-4-2 sort of setup in these days. And John Robertson of Nottingham Forest became the sort of favoured player on the left-hand side. Nottingham Forest at that time were absolutely phenomenal under Brian Clough. They won back-to-back European Cups, which is extraordinary to think about now. So it was hard for Davie to break in. Also, he was in a phase at Ibrox when the team was struggling. He was out of the Scotland team for almost 4 or 5 years, which seems remarkable. There were other wingers like Davy Provan would come in as well. He would play people like John Wark of Liverpool in a kind of right-hand side midfield, or Jim Bett, who'd previously been at Rangers and a good mate of Davie Cooper's, I might add. When he went to Aberdeen, he would play on that side as well. It was really the circumstances that went against Davie Cooper playing for his country at that period. But when he came back, my goodness, what an impact he had.
Under Graham Souness, I think he had a wee honeymoon period, but for 2 years he was unstoppable. And unfortunately, Coop decided now when he wasn't getting a game due to the arrival of Mark Walters, unfortunately, a wee bit of downer for us. Coop joined Motherwell just to basically go and play football.
There were players arriving almost every week at Ibrox at that time. And Davie wasn't happy to sit on the bench, and he had a heart-to-heart with Graham Souness, who was keen to keep him, and in fact had offered him a year contract. And said, look, if you can't guarantee me first team football, then I would like to move on. Souness was very reluctant to let him go because he knew that he had a special talent, but he couldn't guarantee a first team place for most players in the team at that time. So Davie decided to move on to Motherwell.
I think it was just his time to move on. It gave him the opportunity to go to Motherwell. He got a new lease of life, and it was great for Davie.
Signed by his old teammate, of course, Tommy McLean. And Tam Forsyth was the assistant manager, so there was a strong Rangers connection. They also signed Bobby Russell as well, so the gang were getting back together again, almost.
He was an experienced man at that time, so a lot of his game was passing rather than getting wide into the far corners of the pitch. The amount of goals he set up for the likes of Dougie Arnott and Ian Ferguson, just sliding passes through, just timing the pass, catching runs and making, seeing the players out the corner of his eye was second to none.
He was absolutely superb for Motherwell, and again he was doing things that we'd seen him do for Rangers. With the ball in open play and the ability to open up teams and create things, and the ability from dead balls, of course. And he gave Motherwell, in a way, in a kind of reduced way perhaps, the kind of belief and lift that guys like Terry Butcher had given Rangers. It's like, oh my goodness, Davie Cooper's here, what can we do?
Coop became as much a pin-up for the Motherwell fans as he had been for Rangers fans. I think his exit from this place was a bit premature, to be honest with you. The 1991 Scottish Cup final was remarkable, an absolute feast, a theatre of football. And Coop, of course, just lit up the place at Hampden that afternoon. It was just astonishing.
A fantastic game, 4-3. We did come out on top.
And let's not forget the winning goal in extra time from Steve Kirk came off a Davie Cooper corner. So even then, he was contributing at a great level.
We all walked off the park that day. Craig, myself, Bobby was injured, and Coop, and we looked at each other and said, well, this will be the last time this will happen. So we all knew that. But a fantastic achievement at later stages of our career. And certainly Davie was a massive part of that football club.
And I think it says a lot about how much affection that he was held in by Motherwell fans, that the club named a stand after him at Fir Park, and I think that that's only fitting for him, and it just shows the high regard with which he was held in that club.
Former international football star Davie Cooper is critically ill in hospital this evening after suffering a brain hemorrhage.
Davie Cooper remains in a critical condition in the hospital's intensive care unit. He's deeply unconscious and is on a ventilator to help him breathe.
Davie Cooper has died at the age of 39.
He was declared dead at 9:45 this morning and the ventilator was switched off. His fiancée, parents and close friends Derek Johnston and Ellie McCoist were with him shortly before he died.
He had been filming a new series for STV. It's called Shoot. He was filming it with Tommy Craig and Charlie Nicholas. And it basically featured Tommy, Davie and Charlie coaching youngsters. And Cooper was revelling in it. Cooper was thoroughly enjoying it, you could see that. But one day, during one of the sessions, Cooper collapsed. He was rushed to hospital and he'd suffered a brain hemorrhage. And it's reported that when he arrived at hospital, his family were pretty much told at that stage that his chances of survival were slim, and at 10 o'clock the next morning, Davie Cooper's life support machine was turned off.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my sad duty to inform you that Davie Cooper died this morning. He collapsed yesterday morning with a massive brain hemorrhage.
I'll never forget the day Davie Cooper collapsed. It was quite remarkable. I was at a match at Easter Road, and ironically Hibs were playing Motherwell. And they were playing them in the afternoon because there was a power problem at Easter Road and the floodlights couldn't work. So we were all sitting there at Easter Road for I think it was a 3:30 kickoff, strangely, watching this match, which Hibs went on to win 2-0, I believe, and the news started to come through. We suddenly became aware that this terrible tragedy had happened on a training pitch. I'll never forget after the game, of course, the two managers. Alec Miller was the manager of Hibs and a former teammate. He was ashen-faced when he came into the post-match press conference to talk to us and couldn't believe what was going on. Alec McLeish was the manager of Motherwell and a teammate of Davie's with the national team. And he was so upset he couldn't come in to talk with us, and Andy Watson came in to carry out the duties instead. So it was a horrific moment, and then of course he didn't recover. And the following day, the ultimate sad news came through that he passed away.
It's a JFK moment. I can tell you exactly what I was doing. I was in the BBC office, the old office up at Queen Margaret Drive, and the news broke. And I mean, it sounds like a cliche. I just couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. And I can remember having confirmed it was true. I walked out of the office. I actually remember going into the toilets at the BBC in Queen Margaret Drive and shaking my head in disbelief and crying a bit, because forget the football ability. I like to think of him as a friend, and just an amazing bloke. And for that to happen at such a young age is just scandalous. It's ridiculous. And yeah, I remember it very well, and I remember how hard I was struck by it at the time. You get older and you get to understand that people don't live forever, but Coop was due a stack of decades beyond that, because he was a good guy, a really good guy.
I'd seen him the day before. I couldn't believe it, because I'd left training. I was playing in Ireland before I down. I was training with Airdrie down Clyde Park, and I drove away from Clyde Park, and Davie was down with the bin bag on, going for a run, and he saw me, waved, and he said, "I'll give you a phone." Never heard from him again. Obviously, he passed away the next day. I couldn't believe it.
I was in Glasgow. We had a team lunch in a bar in Sauchiehall Street, and the news just came through, the passing of Davie Cooper, and I've never seen so many Rangers players in a bar crying their eyes out. It was tragic. It was so sad. 39-year-old. It's even difficult today to talk about it.
The gates out there, I've seen it since, people tie scarves and all the rest of it. I genuinely can't put into words how far it went round the back of that Copeland Road stand, and how many scarves and various other wee bits and bobs were there. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was just, it was a really sad time, because I mean, he hadn't even retired for the game. He was still playing for Clydebank at the time, and it was a really, really big shock when he passed on.
And everybody sort of took comfort from being over there. You were all among your own people, and you were just marking this football genius.
It was very quiet. It was very emotional, and the sense of loss was palpable. And you could see, again, as I mentioned, as I get older, I understand for guys who had grown up with him in that way. And it was just such a shock. You just couldn't believe it. You couldn't take it in. And I think that it was good for the Rangers family to be able to be together and share the grief and the pain. And none of that even compares to the loss that his family felt, and we need to remember that, but it was still a period of enormous grief.
I played once against him, and then there was a friendly match against with Feyenoord, with Cruyff against him. He's a very great player. It is a pity that I didn't see him on the continent. Of course, he only played there, in Scotland, and he was, for me, one of the greatest players that I ever seen, and I wish him a good year.
Davie Cooper was a world-class footballer. Davie had that way of being a natural footballer, and he could have been on any pitch with any company and just fitted in.
He's up there with Baxter and Laudrup and Gascoigne in terms of just sheer natural talent.
Well, up front, when I look back, at the players I saw, I saw Willie Waddle play. I go that far back. I saw Jimmy Duncanson. I saw Tory Gillick. I saw Ian McMillan. I saw players like that. Different kind of generations. I wouldn't object in the slightest to mention him in the same breath as these players I've just mentioned.
The greatest, in my eyes, he's the greatest Rangers player I've ever seen.
His legacy in Scottish football is set in stone, and he should be remembered, he will be remembered as one of Rangers' best ever players.
I think at the end of his career, when he talked about 12 years at Rangers, and he said, I played for the club I loved. That summed it up, and I think that's what we thought of him as well. We loved him too.
There is no question on Davie Cooper's legendary status. He has the skill of which probably hasn't been matched by many, if any, especially homegrown Rangers players. He has the longevity. This wasn't a one-season wonder or a 3-year contract that he did the biz, wowed the crowds, and then departed on to richer lands. He was there in good times and bad. So he ticks all the boxes really that you would kind of look for, and when you're using that word, which as we all know is probably used far too liberally these days. And yeah, he's everything you would ever want if you were putting together that genuine Hall of Fame, that genuine list of legends at the very top of the pantheon.
Potentially summed up best by the words of the late great Walter Smith himself, who said, God had given Davie Cooper the greatest of talents. God would not have been disappointed the way Davie Cooper used them. I think that sums things up.
I was always a Rangers supporter. Used to go and see them every Saturday in the local bus, and I spent the bulk of my career at the team, the team that I loved. So there's no way I look back. As I said before, you can't do that. You'll drive yourself crazy if you look back and think, if I'd have done this, if only I'd done that. You take your chance, and I had a great career at Rangers. Clydebank first, Rangers, and Motherwell now back at Clydebank. I've enjoyed every minute of it.